Okay, causality. How many of you know the word causality? Because causality is the cause and effect paradigm, right? And we use it. So I now want to start with a joke that I read in around 6th grade. We used to have this like the joke book like Haso Hasa or something like that. So I don't know, you might find it lame because I found it funny when I was 6th grade. I don't know if you are going to find it funny. So but what happens is like there's a guy from the rural Nepal, like remote rural Nepal, and he has never been to a city. And he comes to the city, and then somebody tells him like, hey, if you want to go somewhere, you can just go to the street, raise your hand, and a bus will stop. And then he goes out on the street and raises his hands, right? And then the bus stops, and the driver asks him like, where do you want to go? And the guy is like, I don't know. And of course, obviously the driver gets annoyed, and he's like, hey, why are you wasting my time? And the guy says like, hey, you know, like mind your language because I might just keep on raising my hand and you'll be stuck here. Okay, so there's the cause and effect, right? So, and there's another example. Also, the thing is like the cause and effect. Like just because two things happen together, they are probable, doesn't mean that one is affecting another, right? Because if there's a rooster is crowing, you think that, hey, the sun is going to rise. There's a high probability, right? You can guess. But the rooster crowing is not causing sun to rise. I mean, we are clear on that, right? I don't think anybody is confused on this. Okay. So let's do, okay. I don't know, my Unicode is going, but that is the arrow going there. So let's do a little, again, warm-up. So you can tell us whether you believe this cause and effect or not. Like smoking causes lung cancer, yes or no? Praying to rain god and rain. And fossil fuels and global warming. And immigration causing violence. Okay. And immigration causing innovation. And Facebook causing depression. Or it could be, it could be other, maybe the people who are already depressed, they might be going to Facebook, right? Because to get, so maybe it's causing, because I need different Facebook because Facebook our sponsor. So maybe I'm giving you the counter example, maybe the people who are already feeling depressed and they are going to Facebook to, lighten themselves up, right? So, and Twitter causing echo chamber. And cat crossing the road causing bad luck. And earth rotation causing day and night. And how about rooster crowing, sun rising? Okay, so the thing is like, I think now you have the basic on cause and effect, right? But why do we need to understand causality? Why is it important? Because you don't want to be the rooster that thinks it's crowing causes the sun to rise, right? And because this is obvious, but in real life, we do a lot of those things, Or also, like, I can say must because of our code of conduct, but I think you should, I think you really need to understand causality. Okay, why? Okay. So because they are like very practical questions and very profound questions, right? Why are some countries poor, Is it because they are lazy, their culture? Is it because the colonialism? Or is it because the capitalism or socialism, autocracy? We don't know, right? Those are very profound questions. And does money cause happiness? Does carbon tax reduce carbon emissions? Does educational game cause student engagement? And does Horlicks cause brain growth? How many do you think that Horlicks cause brain growth? No. Okay, but this is what we were told, right? Like in the advertisements that Horlicks cause brain growth. So there's a lot of like ignorance and misuse and abuse regarding the causality. So that's why we really need to understand this concept. So the next, so how can we deduce causality, right? How can you find what is causality? Some things might seem very obvious, like the rooster crowing causing sunrise or not. But some things are very complex, because we are having this like war, like the socialists think that the capitalism is causing the problem, and capitalists think that the socialism is causing the problem, right? And the locals think that immigrants are causing the problem, whereas immigrants think that the bigotry is causing the problem. Those are very complex issues. And how do we deduce that? So the statistic 101 is correlation is not causation. So just you see something coming together, you can't say that there's a causal factor. Okay, now this one example. So my question is not which eyes are better, but we will go to the main question later. So the color of left eye is correlated with the color of right eye, right? Everyone agrees on that? Correlated. It's not absolute, I mean, we know we have some people who have two different color eyes, right? But again, like, this is the correlation, yeah. But do you think the color of left eye is causing color of right eye? How do you know that? Because if you change the color of left eye, it's not going to change the color of right eye, right? So the model is the color of left eye is not causing color of right eye, but the melanin that is causing the color of both eyes. So unless you change the melanin in your physiology, this is, changing the color of left eye is not going to change the color of right eye. So there is this another example. In a primary school, the shoe size is correlated with the spelling ability, right? The students who have a larger shoe size have better spelling ability, and the students who have smaller shoe size have lower spelling ability. But if you stress their feet, will their spelling ability increase? So one thing is that you are not supposed to stress their feet, right? even if you think that it's going to increase their spelling ability. And the other thing is like even if you stress their shoe size, which we are not supposed to do, feet, it's not going to it's not going to increase the spelling ability. So again, this is another model. Shoe size is not causing spelling ability, whereas the age is causing both. Okay, we are clear on this, right? And there is like some like Simpson's paradox, right? Like where there are more firefighters, the damage is higher, right? Does it mean that the firefighters are causing the more damage? No, right? Anybody wants to draw the causal model for this? What is going on? So what is going on here? Anybody wants to come on the board and draw it? So yeah, the fire, how big the fire, it is causing both, right? It is how big the fire is causing, how many firefighters you need, and it is causing the fire damage. Okay, I'll draw it then. So what's going on is, and this is called the spurious association. You see they are related, but actually this is causing both. And in real world, so these are the spurious connections we need to be really careful of. Because you might think that, hey, all these women empowerment program are causing the women to be less empowered, but you can also see that, hey, maybe the places where they are less empowered, you are having more women empowerment program, right? Not that the programs are causing the less. Same thing with all these other interventions. Okay, so it's kind of sad. Like, okay, the correlation cannot guarantee causation. Then how can you deduce causation? Like, if you change the color of left eye, does it change color of right eye? So you really need to be careful. Like, only after we change and see, then we can be confident that whether it is causing or not, right? Just looking and saying that, hey, the more firefighters there are, more damage, that's why the number of firefighters is causing the damage. You actually go and change the number of firefighters and see what is the damage is going to be like. 50, the same fire, you see 2 firefighters and you see 10 firefighters and you see the the extent of damage. So this causality, the concept is very tightly related to the concept of intervention. So if you intervene and change carbon tax, does it change global emissions? If you intervene and change pollution, does it change citizen health? If you intervene and change educational material, does it change student engagement? To really know whether there is a causal effect or not, you need to change and see. Because just looking at the probability distribution, there could be just a coincidence, right? So the point is like, one day you make the rooster crow and see whether the sun rises or not, and the next day you make the rooster not crow and see whether the sun rises or not. So this is how the concept of causality and intervention is tightly related. So for that, we do the experiment with randomized controlled trials. So do you know, like, how many of you know the randomized controlled trials? Okay, so this is, so the randomized controlled trials is just like, there's, okay, I'll give you this example. I'll show you this. Do educational games cause student engagement? So what you do is like, if you don't do it, right? If there's a bunch of students and if you just give them educational game and you see their engagement had changed, and you can't claim that, hey, this game is causing them engage, you know? You don't know, they might be going to home and reading books, or it is the classroom is happening, so many things could be happening, right? So what you do is like, from the population, you create two groups, very randomly assigned. And then one group, you just give them basic, the control, and another group, you give them your medicine, the games, your treatment. And it goes same with medicine. There's a lot of medicine experiment, right? Oh, does fish oil cause brain health or not? You do the same. You take the group, you make two groups, you give them one group, you give them fish oil, and one group you don't know, and you compare the results. So this is the way you can understand causality. But let's see this another example, right? Does smoking cause lung cancer? So what is wrong with this? Yeah, because you can't force people to, you know, and in the past it has, even in prison it's happening, right? We do all the animal testing and we do all these pills, medicine testing, it's happening, you know, but it's not ethical, you know. You can't just like force this bunch of people smoke, right? So the point is like, there are some questions, right, where it's very hard to do the randomized experiment. Like, does smoking cause lung cancer? You can't like make one group smoke and one group not smoke. The same thing, like, does student motivation cause greater engagement? But how can you know, change the motivation, right? You can't change the motivation, you know. Yeah. The same thing, like, does being woman cause more workplace harassment? Again, you can't randomize, you know. I mean, make them women and make them men. So the thing is, yes, I mean, this is, randomized controlled trials are very uncontroversial. I mean, they are also controversial to some extent, because we had these studies like, oh, coffee is good for health, coffee is bad for health, egg is good for health, egg is bad for health. Like, those randomized controlled trials are not always sure sort, but they are the most effective. But even though they are not always possible,
yeah, I have a question. So before you move on, can you give us some more intuition about randomization in the trials? Why is it so important that you randomly assign?
Yeah, so the thing is, okay, here, right? Okay, let's say if you go to this, you want to do this experiment, whether this works or not, right? And I am this, like, I created this game and I want to sell it. So I go to this, okay, this classroom section A, you use the game, and this classroom section F, you don't use the game. And then I take the result and I say that, hey, you know, this section A students did really good, right? Because they got the game, you know. You can do that. You can say that, hey, you know, oh, the fish oil is good for health, and then you got a bunch of healthy people, you know, and then there's a bunch of other unhealthy people. You don't give it, right? So you can't make the conclusion.
If section A is already better than section F, then
yes. Maybe the section A has internet, and maybe section F doesn't have internet. Maybe the section A has motivated teacher, and section F doesn't have. So what you do is like from section A, you pick like randomly. Okay, you go this randomly, so that other confounding variables, because we saw, right? Because just something happens, we can't claim, right? Because there's something other happening. The same thing with the classroom, right? You see that, hey, this works, but maybe this is the teacher, Maybe this is the teacher is causing the better engagement, right? It's not your software. And actually in the, so are people clear on this? Why we do need a randomization? Because again, this goes to the tenor for causality, because there could be so many factors causing, I mean, again, somebody like, let's say coffee is good for health. Maybe those people like who are drinking coffee, they might be from the higher socioeconomic status, right? No matter whether they drink coffee or not, they might be having things. So you take a bunch of high socioeconomic status people and you randomly assign. You drink coffee, you don't drink. You drink coffee, you don't drink. So that you can get the conclusion.
So what about if we do like before and after kind of experiment? Like, so same population, we will measure their intelligence before we intervene, and we will measure their intelligence after we intervene. So it's the same population. So
no, I think what happens, they call it the pseudo, observational. Again, this is like, it's just an observational study, because you don't know what is happening during the time, right? You just say that, hey, section A, you use this, educational game, and then we'll measure your knowledge at the end, right? And of course it goes up, right? But you don't know if it's the educational game or something other happening. Maybe they are using other games at home, right? So you can't conclude. Maybe you can see some patterns, but you can't make conclusions.
Like I read about DID, difference in difference, and so in that one we can do.
Okay, yes, CC can explain that. I don't know about that one.
So that's difference in difference estimation. It's one way to think through it, but you're making assumption that all the changes that are happening is linear, and also it's only because of the intervention is the only thing that's changing in those population over time. So, in that example, the classroom is changing. There could be other things changing from point A to B. If the only thing that's changing from time A to time B is the control and intervention and nothing else, then you can study that. But then otherwise you have to control for all the variables. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think for that you need to put them in really like controlled, sterile environment. And I think a lot of, medical studies, right, they happen that way. Yeah, you just like maybe make them drink coffee and not change other thing that is going to change their caffeine label, and then you can see the increase. Okay. Here?
Ma'am, I was wondering on the topic of causality. Have you heard about the Stanford prison experiment?
Which one?
The Stanford prison experiment?
The Stanford, I don't know about that.
No.
Can you?
Okay, so the experiment was like putting people in a difficult situation and see if the behavior turns, quote unquote evil, given the situation is evil. Things like that. And would you care to weigh in here and tell us like what would be this?
I think. So like you make people stay and then people abuse and how the behavior of the crowd changed, right? Oh, okay, that's. I think that's again. What are you going to? So again, you have to think. What is the cause and effect? Are you going to say that hey, people are inherently evil people? Are you going to see whether they are evil or not? That is one thing. But in the causal thing is like being in the situation where they are anonymous, that can bring the more bad thing into them, right? So you can, maybe the experiment would be like, hey, you have this group of students and you randomly assign, some are anonymous and some are not. And then you see their behavior, you know? And you see, if you find out that, hey, these people who are anonymous people, they are having more obnoxious behavior, then you can say that, oh, this anonymity brings out the obnoxious in them. So, yeah. And I think in your particular case, you can do this, like, I vaguely know this setup, but I think like somebody is going to put there with no mask on their face, right? And somebody abuse, and all the people want to abuse. The thing is like just the statement, hey, are people inherently bad? That's not a causal question. Yeah, that's just like observation, that's just a fact, right? But the causal is like what makes them act bad. So you need to create that thing.
I'd also like to point out that there is a lot of ethical issue with this experiment. So
Yeah.
I don't think you can repeat that again.
Yeah, so the thing is like you got, right? The experiment is like, again, what is your question? Is it a causal question or is it an observational question? So,
Dovan,
okay.
just one more comment on that. There's a very, very common fact in psychology that you test on populations that are easy to test on. And the people that are easy to test on are students because they're at the university and they can't run away.
Yeah.
So I would be very careful making very big claims about human behavior from 20 undergrads in an experiment.
Yeah.
Like, it is an interesting finding, I
Yeah.
guess, overall. One can think about it, but there's so many flaws in the design of
Yeah.
this and in the way that it was carried out that I wouldn't go too far in the
Yeah.
interpretation of what it means about people in general.
Yeah, I think that's a very, and this is one of the slides that like, because you are only modeling it, right? You are only talking about the model. That's not the real world, right? What is your sample? You know, if I take a picture, you know, somebody say that, hey, there are like 3 men in the front row. If I take this picture, there are like other 3 men in the front row. If I take this picture, they are like the technicians, right? So there's the whole reality, and you take the snapshot. Your model, your data is just a snapshot. From that snapshot, you make some predictions, right? Like you said, like you go and experiment, you know, because a lot of experiments, they are done, as I said, like in the university, or they might be some certain socioeconomic background. So that your model's validity is only dependent on your data, you know, your selection. So, and I think that's where we need to be very careful about. And I think that also takes to the AI and society session that Pascal and Sujay ran, that if you are training this model in one data, that's not going to generalize. So the thing is like, we as scientists always need to be careful, like, where does this data come from? What is the variance, you know? Are you talking about 20 students from Nepal or 200 or 2,000? Because a lot of advertising agencies, they might just take, you know, like 20 people and they make the big claim. So we are scientists, we are not advertisers, so we really need to like be careful about the whole picture. So now we go to, because this is not going to help us all the time, right? So now we need to go back to statistic to get some help. Okay, so this is the statistic 101. Correlation is not causation. But this is not the complete story, because causation and correlations are themselves correlated. Causation reveals itself in correlation. And if A and B are correlated, either A is causing B or B is causing A, or there is some latent common cause. So if there is some, you know, you can see something together, it's not that nothing is happening there, something is happening. So you just need to know how that hidden something, you know, what is the role? Is it directly involved, indirectly involved? How? So, and this is where this causal modeling approach is all about deducing cause and effect from observational data. So now, like, we concluded that.
Can you go back to the previous slide, please? But like A and B, if they are correlated, it would also be like just random, right? Is it necessary for them to have at least some latent common cause?
Yeah, again, that's what we do the statistical significance test, right? I mean, yes, it could be random, If you see something correlated and their p-value is 0.1, this is just random, right? But if its p-value is less than 0.05, then we give more. So because it's all
I mean, like I've seen some examples, like the number of movies Nicolas Cage
yeah,
appeared
true,
in,
true.
and like people drowning in USA.
Yeah, right. So those are our true variables, and you can see, right? Because, I mean, do you call that they are correlated or not? I mean, you think that, oh, they are a bunch of scattered randomness, or you can see that there is this, right? So how can you tell whether there is some like real, something real relationship or not? So you keep on collecting more data, right? As you keep collecting more and more data, it becomes more clear. Is it going to be like random like this, or is it going to show the pattern? So that's why you need a large sample size. You can see the pattern. And as you said, even if you go, it could be just, so that's why we do this statistical test. You don't only, you see like how much confidence you put into that. And 0.05, it just, again, this is also your 95% confidence, right? So you can never be truly confident, but you need to have some cutoff point, right? So the statistician, they kind of created this arbitrary value that, okay, this is going to be the cutoff point, and we are going to believe this, and afterwards we are not going to believe. But as I said, that there's still like 5% chance that it's going to be random.
Okay, even if there is like 100% correlation, let's say, so can we say like either A is causing B or B is causing A?
Oh,
or there is some latent variable that is causing
yeah,
both?
yeah. So
can we say that?
No. Even if they're 100% correlated, right, we can't say that. We can't say that they are causally. So that's the point. Like, but there might be some causal mechanism going on. So we can say that those two, one is causing one, but there's some like a causal process going on. So even if the rooster crowing is not, is it okay, sound? Even if the rooster crowing is not causing the sunrise, but there must be some going on, right? Some mechanism going on, we can say that.
Does that mean if I were to repeat the experiment again, there is high likelihood that it's not correlated because you're only looking at cases where it happens together and you're saying, oh, it's correlated. And as Dovan just mentioned, for looking at significance, you have to keep repeating and getting more sample to see if it's significant relationship, and if it indeed is, then one of these cases might happen.
Yeah, thank you to both of you. And I think like Chris said the very important assumption, because this is all depends on the assumption we are making, right? Because when you are doing this statistical, we are already assumed that, hey, the distribution is going to be normal, and we have certain assumptions. So when we talk about this correlation, significant correlation, we are assuming that, hey, as you mentioned, we are making some statistical assumption. So, and it just changed, this assumption changed from statistical domain to probabilistic domain to causal domain to physical domain, different domains. For example, in Newtonian world, right, you are making some assumption and you work within that assumption. But if you go to the quantum world, then all these assumptions, they don't work, the equation don't work. So the same thing, when we are making the statistical discussions, we are basing our assumption. Because if we don't have assumption, we can't say anything, right? So it's like, oh, everything is random, like it's all nothingness. So to make some meaning out from the world, we are assuming something. So I think on this note, we can take, it's 10, right? We can take the tea break. So tea break is from 10 to 10:30, and we'll come back. So the causal modeling is all about deducing cause and effect from observational data. So when you can't do the randomized control study, whatever data you have, right, there's some probability distribution, joint probability distribution, dependence and independence. So based on that knowledge, what can you deduce from the causal point of view? But we'll also talk about the limitation of this approach. So, I'm sorry that all my Unicode is kind of getting messed up there. I should have done a PDF, but then that box is like the causal arrow. Please translate in your head. So the causal models are graphical models. And what they do is like they make the additional assumptions that the links between nodes present causal influence. Again, because this concept of assumption is very crucial. Because if it was just a probability, just a statistical model, you just say that, hey, if this is, the link is there, this causing more, if their distribution is, they are dependent, but here they are not only associated and dependent, but they also have causal connection. So if A is leading to, if in this causal model, if you see this diagram, it says that if you change A, it is going to change C, which is different than in Bayesian network and other things. Like if this thing changes, you can see the change, but this changing, intervening might not necessarily change that parameter. So some brief introduction. There are like 4 types of associations. This is a direct effect. A is causing C. Smoking is causing lung cancer. Any example from the audience? Sorry?
Burning fossil fuels causes.
Yeah, the burning fossil fuels causes global warming, right? And then this is the indirect effect. A causes C, but through B. So knowledge causes grade, but indirectly through performance. Even if you have high knowledge, but if you can't perform, you cannot get good grades. And this is called the mediator. This is mediating. And another example will be there's a cloud, there's the rain, and there is the wet grass. So the cloud causes rain, and the rain causes wet grass. Just having cloud doesn't cause the wet grass, right? So this is the spurious association. Again, we saw the example. This A's is causing suicides and spelling ability. So this is not a causal connection at all. B is causally connected to A, B is causally connected to C, but those two are not causally connected. Any example for this one? We saw the firefighter example, right? How big the fire is, that causes number of firefighters, and that causes the damage. And this is called confounder. And this is another example. This is independent. Like A and C are independent given that B. So pollution is causing lung cancer, smoking is causing lung cancer, but smoking and pollution, they themselves are independent. I mean, you can always say that, oh, this is so polluted, so I'm kind of like stressed, I'm smoking. You can make that long-winded connection. But in general, the point is like, even though those two are connected, have a common effect, those two causes are not causally related among themselves. And this is called collider. Okay, the recap. Does anybody want to draw some example? Any. On the board? You want to draw? Yeah, just anything simple. Okay, can you tell which one of this is? The indirect, right? So what it is saying that, okay, if you burn fossil fuels, that is going to cause global warming, but through higher CO2. I mean, if you manage to burn fossil fuel so that the CO2 is not emitted, it's not going to cause global warming, right? Yeah. So this is the concept of causality. So anybody wants to do it? Okay. Okay. No. Now again, this is so you have this data, right? Like there are the variables, and you can see how they change, the variance, covariance, their joint probability, dependence, independence, right? You have all this, what you can see. From that, how can you create this causal structure? And this is where the causal inference comes in. From the data, how can you create the model? From the data you see, how can you infer the model, which is a representation of your reality. So actually this correlation is not causation. It's very true for single pair of variables because there's no way of telling. But if you have patterns of correlation, then you can, deduction is more easier. So, I mean, again, this is, you can skip it. I mean, you can, if you are interested, you can read more about it later. But what it does is like there's a deseparation. This is a paradigm created by Julia Pearl. So what it says that like based on how those two variables are dependent or condition independent, you can direct the edge and the direction. So let's do this causal inference example number 1. You can see this A and B are correlated, right? Just looking at, you have no way saying whether A causes B or B causes A. But let's say you have 3 variables. A is correlated to B, B is correlated to C, but A and C are not correlated. So this is what you see from your data that you can observe. So, so there are 3 variables. We don't know how it's going to look like, right? First, let's create it. This directed acyclic graph is the graphical structures. So from these 3 variables, first let's create all the possible, right? Yes, I was trying to, because there is some formula for it, because if you have number of variables, if you allow only a cyclic graph, how many possible combinations. I mean, I could not do it yesterday. If anybody wants to do later, you can do it. I mean, there is a formula for it. So these are all the possible combinations. If you are talking about cyclic graph, there are more. But if you are only talking about a cyclic, right? Like this is the whole possible combinations. But here, I mean, here we know that, right? There's no connection between A and C. Like if they are not correlated at all, then you cannot have the graph, possible graph where there's A is connected to C. Whether it is A connected to C or causing C or C connected to A, right? Because if there is the causation, because it implies the correlation. Doesn't always guarantee, but most of the time it guarantees the correlation. So let's say all these other graphs that with A and C linking, they are kind of invalid. So everybody understand till this point, right? So now you have 4 possible graphs. So where do you go from here? And this is where the deseparation criteria, this is some, so it tells like, hey, for this condition, these 3 are not possible, you select that one. So this is what that inference is telling me. So I select this one. So in this case, from all these possible graph, I was able to pick one graph. But we are not always lucky. I'll show you with more example. So this is another example. Oh, okay, so the same example. So from this correlation, we can give like this pattern. We can guarantee that this is the structure. But this is a special case. So this is another example, example number 3. So here A and B are correlated, B and C are correlated, A and C are correlated, all three are correlated with each other. But what do you know is like A and C are conditionally independent on B. So meaning that if you just look at A and C, they are moving together, correlated. But if you control B, A and C are not. Like, is it clear? This conditional independence concept, right? For example, let's say the example is like if you see the higher knowledge kids, if you have high knowledge, you can have good grade, right? They are correlated. But if you look at the performance and if you control, then you don't see correlation between knowledge and grade. Like even if you are a very highly knowledgeable person, but if you don't appear on the exam and if you don't take the exam or do well, then your grade is not going to come great. So this is the idea of conditional independence. The same thing, like here you say, like if you just look at this fossil fuel and global warming, you can say that, hey, burning. But if you control for this, even if you are burning a lot of fossil fuel, but with this new technology, geoengineering technology, that they are not releasing the CO2, you are not going to have that effect. So these two variables, if you just look at them, they are correlated. But if you control for this, they are not correlated. Is it clear? Okay, because this is one of the very fundamental concepts, because this is where the strength of causality comes, because these things are moving together, but if you control, these are not moving together, then you are like, hey, maybe they are not, so related. They appear related, but maybe there's some other thing that is happening. So in this scenario, you have three possible causal graphs. Because A and C there's no there. Whether A is causing B and B is causing C, this is one possible, or one is maybe C is causing B and B is causing A, and the other is maybe B is causing both of them. Here what happens is you can't tell. Just based on that data, you can't tell what is going on, So, and they are called Markov equivalence structure. So what it means that like sometimes you get lucky and from your data you can pick one graph like, oh, this is it. And sometimes, they are so confusing. So you say that, oh, maybe one of those three possible graphs. So now we see, right? I mean, correlation alone is not enough. Randomized control study is not enough because you can always do it. And apparently this de-separation criteria is also not enough. So where do we go from here, right? What can we do more to know the causality? And this is where the prior knowledge comes in. Because we are modeling the real world, right? I mean, we already have some knowledge to it. So you can use this prior knowledge to minimize your search space. Okay, this is the example. I mean, just if they are A and B, you don't know what A is, what B is, you can't really tell, just they are correlated whether A causes B or B causes A. But what if you know that A happened before E? Which are you going to pick? A causes B, right? Because if A happened before B, B might not be causing A. So, so that's why you know that, hey, smoking is causing lung cancer, but lung cancer is not causing smoking. It's not that you got diagnosed with lung cancer, then you start smoking, right? You must be smoking before you got the lung cancer. So this is where you can, use your prior knowledge. The same thing is like, those three, we don't know right now, like, they are just like A, B, C random variables, but what if you know that B happened before both A and C? Which do you think is the one? Third one, right? Because everybody clear why is third one? Can anybody please volunteer and say why is the third one? Who? You? So anybody? Why is the third one? Okay, do you want to say why is the third one? Okay, somebody from the ladies. Anybody wants to volunteer? Yeah, that we had. But here what's happening is like, we know that B happened before A, right? If B happened before A, this can't be true, right? Because A can't cause B if B happened before A. So U is not possible. The same thing, if B happened before C, that is the second is not possible, right? C could not be causing B. So those two are, gone. So now you conclude that. So what's happened is like, okay, you use your D-separation algorithm and criteria, and you use your prior knowledge, and you can narrow down your search space. So you select this one. So like the same thing, right? Here, oh, okay. So this is the slide okay. Sorry, I mean, this is the wrong slide. But the point is like in this, oh, okay, this is correct. Okay, this. Okay, so which one is correct? Second one, right? Because spelling ability is not causing your A's, right? And you also know that suicide is not causing your A's, because age is causing both, right? So that's what we select the second one. So we all are on the same page up to this? Okay, but the thing is like, but can temporal precedence, which means like which happened earlier in time, always determine cause and effect? Because the rooster crows before the sunrise, right? It should mean that the rooster is actually causing the sunrise, because the rooster crew? What is the past form? Rooster crowed before the sunrise, right? So how do you explain to that? What's going on here? Okay, I'll reveal it. So what's happening is like, the circadian rhythm, like our body's clock. So the Earth rotation is causing the sunrise, and Earth rotation is causing the circadian rhythm, and that is causing the rooster crowing. Is it clear? So this is more complex. So just because something happened earlier, the same thing like the weather forecast and the actual weather, right? I mean, the forecast happens before the weather, but the forecast is not causing the weather, because there is some other barometer reading, other more complex mechanism going on. So again, everything is very complex and nuanced when we go to this causal paradigm. And sometimes you can't tell, which variable occur first. Like for example, I went to the classroom with this educational game, and I see that the students who are engaged are also performing very highly. But I can't tell, whether they are engaged, that's why they are performing great, or whether they are performing great and they feel engaged. You know what I mean, right? So because sometimes like maybe the game made everything very easy and they got it correct and they feel very motivated and engaged. So when things are happening at the same time, you can't tease apart what is causing what. So the point is like, this causal modeling paradigm is not a perfect process. It is still in relative infancy. So you can use whatever tool you can use, right? If it's possible, just go and do the randomized control study. And if you happen to be lucky to have this set of variables where you can very narrow down one unique structure, you are lucky. If that is not sufficient, you add your prior knowledge, and but still you can still like get into this like, okay, I finally come to this point, but I don't know what is causing what, right? So there is always some kind of complexity going on. I could not show you the simulation, but if you want to try, this is a tetrad, a free causal modeling software package. You can go to the website and you can use it online or download and see. You can play with the data. And it is really cool because it has two views. Like one is the graphical view, one is the tabular view, and you can generate data, create your own randomized samples. And from that randomized sample, you can do graphs. So if you are more curious about it, you can go and play around with it. Okay, so now let's sum up the causal modeling process. Okay, so start with the real world, right? And you use the data, you input the data, and you input the prior knowledge. And when we say data, it comes with the variables, conditional independency, the probability distribution, everything, right? And you use in this causal inference box, and it gives you the model. And it gives you actual set of Markov equivalent model, not one model, because we are just inferring, we don't know the reality, right? From here, we don't know the real world. We only know the snapshot, you know? I mean, maybe the people who took the picture, maybe the person took from here, took the whole picture, or maybe the person took this, right? When we measure the variable, we might have measured all the hidden variables, or we might have missed the hidden variables. So based on what you measure, what you see, your model is going to be dependent on that, right? So if you just don't know about the human physiology of circadian rhythm, and if you just see the crow crowing, the rooster crowing, and the sunrise, you are really confused, you know, like what's going on. But after you know what goes inside, then you can add more variables and can create more accurate model. Okay, so why is causal modeling stronger than other statistical methods? We already have correlation, partial correlation, regression. We all have that tools, right? But based on that tool, what does it offer more? Because this is a new paradigm. What does it offer more? Because with those data and variance, you already have so many tools. What does it more? So there are three things. One is it creates another layer of criteria, right? It adds another layer of knowledge, like, hey, you know, if the variables are distributed like that, it is going to have this graph structure. Of this kind of graph structure is going to create this kind of, you know, variance. So you have that knowledge, you know, and that's on the branch of computer science and philosophy. You know, that goes more to that's the job of philosopher. You know, like what happens. You know, both the statisticians and philosopher. And the guy, the Julia Pearl, who started this causal modeling, he's both. He's a philosopher and he's a computer science person. He's a statistic person. So he came up with that. And then what is like it helps you. It gives you this structure to add prior knowledge. In other statistical approaches, there's no way where you can put the prior knowledge, right? Because you are not modeling it as the real structure. Here you can add the prior knowledge. And the third is like it adds causal assumptions. And again, like I mentioned and Chris mentioned last time, these assumptions are very crucial because what happens is like, again, if you don't assume anything, everything is noise, right? Nothing makes sense. It's not all nothingness, right? So to create meaning, you add assumption and you see the pattern and you create the meaning. So the more assumption you made, more clear pattern you can see and the more meaning you can derive. So what causal modeling does is like there's already these statistical assumptions like independence, normality, homeo, yeah. And on top of that, it adds more causal assumption. I'm not going to go through that, but again, those of you interested, you can go and, you know, do that. And again, it depends, like, are you going to agree to that assumption or not is, again, like, is in the onus of the researcher. Because you know your domain, and if they make sense or not, right? I mean, those Newtonian assumptions, do they make sense in a quantum world or not? Because different worlds have different assumptions. So you make your choice. For me, like I was doing it for the educational domain and it works for me. But maybe somebody who is working with neutrons and atoms or whatever, that assumption don't hold. So they cannot use this framework. They need to create another framework with different assumptions. So the limitations of causal model is, again, causal assumption is a limitation because this is where you get attacked, right? Oh my God, you are saying all these cool things. You are just like a magician. You get the data and say that, oh, this is a structure. But somebody says that, hey, I mean, how can you say that this assumption holds true, right? I mean, to what extent? So, like the no free lunch theory, because the more assumption you add, the more chances of misleading or the more chance of error. So this is where the causal modeling people, they get a lot of attack. Because like they say that, hey, you know, your faithfulness doesn't work, your causal sufficient doesn't make sense because it's not how things work. Because one of the other, like, oh, there is no cyclical feedback, right? But in real life, there's a cyclical feedback, right? Because engagement causes more performance, performance causes more engagement. But when we do that, for the sake of simplicity, we say that, hey, this feedback doesn't work here. So we are making that assumption. And the other thing is like there's a market equivalence structure. Even after all that, you put everything, you throw whatever tools you have, still you cannot always conclude on one structure. There can be like a global maxima. You know, there could be different structures that would fit the same. So you cannot claim that, hey, this is what I know. And the other thing is like this modeling is only, it creates a structure from only the variables that you have taken into account, right? If there are some other hidden variables that you don't know of, then this causal modeling is imperfect. Does it make sense? So, okay, I'll go back to this. So, this is the real world, right? But your model is making the model not from the real world, but from the data and the prior knowledge. Because we don't know this, only this. So if you miss out, you know, that thing, then your model is going to be faulty. And because for the causal, yeah.
So if I were someone who did not know that there was a concept of circadian rhythm,
Yeah.
then how would I will I be able to assume that there is a concept like that, some concept that humans do not understand?
Yeah, and then if you don't know the circadian rhythm, then you think that, oh, the earth rotation is causing the rooster crowing, right? Which is still correct at some point because it indirectly affects, but the real mechanism that maybe tomorrow we do more research into circadian rhythm and we can again analyze it into different nodes, then it becomes more complex. The thing is like the more knowledge you have of the world, your causal model becomes more complex, more accurate, more nuanced. So the point of the research is, again, trying to find as many latent variables as possible. Like, for example, in the knowledge and performance model, right? I haven't seen the engagement level, right? So that's, I have not measured. So my causal model is kind of simplest, is untrue because knowledge is not the only thing that is causing your performance. Engagement is also causing. And maybe the room temperature is also causing, right? Because if you are too hot, then you are performing wrong, you know, because even if you are very careful, even if you are very smart, if the, the situation is like that, you are going to. So the point is like, your model is only true as much as the data you collect. So before making the causal claim, like, hey, I understood this is how the student learning works, or this is how the world works, this is how the poverty works, this is how the debt, this is how the development works. You need to have this like humility and this kind of understanding that your model is incomplete. And this is like, if your experiment is statistic, you ought to have done a better experiment. And I totally believe that being a research and education thing, because like, if you can do a clean experiment, you just get very clear result, right? But if you can't have this noisy thing, then you have to, you know, do all this. Ajad, raise hands. Okay. Anybody wants to add anything to it? Okay.
I was actually curious to hear your opinion on the previous point you were making. So a lot of people in causality, you say, are getting attacked because of the assumptions behind the causal model. But I would contend that anyone who's doing science is either implicitly or explicitly making those. So that the only difference I really see is that people who do the causal modeling explicitly say these are the assumptions. People who don't do it, they implicitly have them encoded and just refuse to make a claim about what they're actually thinking is the process, but they're still doing the same kind of work.
Yeah, that's true, because like we need to, again, like as soon as you want to create any meaning is based on assumption, right? Without assumption, there is no meaning. So, but the point is like they are not attacking like, hey, why are you making this causal assumption on top of it? It's not that why they are making causal, it's just like they don't agree with those assumptions. So it's not the act of making assumption that they attack, but those actual tenets of assumption that they have problem with. Okay, that's clear? Okay. So the thing is, yeah, I mean, again, the sure short way is to go the randomized control study, but again, those are not also like 100% perfect, as we have seen all this, you know, this coffee, egg, randomized control study. But George said that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And I think this is the main takeaway point, because you cannot observe the totality of the universe, right? So based on that, so as a researcher, what you can do most is like take as much, you know, information as possible and create a model, but not make a very universal claim, right? Hey, I know that capitalism works, or I know that capital doesn't work. You can't make those universal statements. You say that on this experiment, I took on this country for this many years, these are my causal graph.